could an omnipotent being create a stone so heavy that even it could not lift it? How wonderful that we have met with a paradox. Now we have some hope of making progress. If a student today should ask, "What creates the force of electricity?" his teacher will reply, "Photons." The student may be satisfied, but in fact, no explanation has been provided. There is something about having a label for things which makes most people feel that they understand, even when they don't. Within the context of this so-called paradox, the assumption that we tend to make is that we even know the reality of what a stone is. In reality, it is the gaps in our understanding that allow for such a seemingly paradoxical circumstance to exist. It does not exist in reality, but only in a linguistic approximation of reality that is based in our intellectual and objective understanding of reality. Before you can understand how to overcome this paradox, you must understand how to overcome the inherent limitations of the intellectually objective methodology, or in other words, you must understand how it is even possible to know what a stone, or a photon, in the case of the Milo Wolf quote, is, before you attempt to approximate this reality with a linguistic description within the context of a so-called paradox. In other words, in order to find the solution to this so-called paradox, you must also find the solution to the paradox that forms the foundation of a worldview that is based solely in an intellectually objective approach to understanding reality, which, of course, is that you can never actually directly describe the fundamental nature of that reality. Within the context of Milo Wolf's quote, you can never directly describe what a photon is, only its forms and/or interactions relative to other photons. The omnipotence paradox is not a paradox. You had no idea what a stone even was before the idea for the paradox came to you. You only have an intellectual approximation of what a stone is, and because you do not know how to overcome the paradox that forms the foundation of your very approach to understanding reality, linguistic propositions such as this seem paradoxical and insurmountable. The so-called paradox is not even based in reality. The only thing it really does is force us to subconsciously marvel at the gaps in our own understanding. It forces us up against the bounding walls of our own ignorance, and in this respect it is very much like a Zen koan. Paradoxes only exist within our conceptualizations of reality, as those conceptualizations have been limited by our own lack of awareness and reliance on intellectual objectivity. They do not exist in reality itself. To overcome a seemingly insurmountable paradoxical situation, we must change what we are able to perceive about that situation. We must step outside of the plane that the paradox exists on. We must transcend the cycle of mutual exclusivity that the paradox creates. Now we can do this through the expansion of our perception and our awareness, through expanding our direct knowledge of what the self has the ability to become aware of about itself and the reality. If you knew what a stone, or a photon, actually was, and understood the method by which it can be known, you would understand why that this is not paradoxical. So, a good example of this is in the movie Inception, in the scene where they're demonstrating how to use, within the dream space, a paradoxical construction such as the Penrose steps. So you can go around the steps just like they showed you in the movie, but in order to break the paradox, you had to literally change your perception, and you can see how the camera sort of drops in the movie, and then you can see the paradox, and you essentially remove yourself from the plane that that paradox exists on, and view it from a new perspective. It's the same thing with this paradox, or any and every paradox that you encounter that seems to be intellectually impossible to overcome. The truth is, it is intellectually impossible to overcome, and that is because the very mental tool that the intellect is not the tool that is best applicable for overcoming that paradox, and it is also not the tool that is best applicable for knowing what reality is. Ultimately, the answer is yes. An omnipotent being can fulfill both seemingly mutually exclusive aspects of this paradox. The issue that we have with it is knowing how. Just as the issue is with knowing how to overcome the paradox Milo Wolf indicates, is at the heart of the common modern scientific worldview. An apparent paradox represents a limitation in our own ability to know reality. It does not represent something fundamental about the nature of that reality. You must learn to overcome that which is limiting you if you wish to proceed beyond it. This is why someone like Niels Bohr would even say such a thing about a paradox, or any paradox, in the first place. So with that, I leave you with this. In order to learn how to overcome what you perceive as an insurmountable paradox, you must unlearn what it is that you have learned. Expand your awareness and perception, and know the true nature of that which appears before you. Know how you relate to its true nature, and know how you are inseparable from that which appears before you as object. If you want to know what the stone is, what a photon is, then know yourself. Then you can re-examine any seeming paradox because you have overcome the very thing that made it paradoxical, which again is lack of awareness and reliance on intellectual objectivity. Now, to compress everything I've just said into one anecdotal exchange between a hypothetical master and a student, a student once asked his master, "Could the Creator make a stone so heavy, even it could not lift it?" The master looked around and pointed to a large stone nearby. He said, "Could you lift that stone?" The student looked puzzled and replied, "No." Then the master said, "The Creator made the stone, and it just realized it cannot lift it." The words of truth are always paradoxical. Lao Tzu. Alright, so again, I will be releasing more information leading up to the release of this book that I'm writing. I'm still going back through it and editing it and realizing how much more I need to add to it. The sort of bones of the book are there, but it still has some work before I will be in a place where I can actually release it. Anyway, again, I'm still going back to South Carolina to teach. I'll upload that as soon as that's done. And I hope you guys keep watching, and please let me know if you have any questions or anything. And my website, as always, is heartknowledge777.com. Thank you very much.